How do we build more reliable AI? Why have knowledge graphs become more important than ever in the age of AI? How do data products and the decentralized knowledge graph shape the future of decentralized knowledge? And what role do AI agents play in enabling a more verifiable and trustworthy AI? On this episode of the On TRAC podcast, we're tackling these critically important questions and more. On TRAC is the show that brings you all the latest and juiciest developments from the OriginTrail ecosystem and the verifiable internet for AI that the OriginTrail technology crucially enables. My name is Jonathan DeYoung, and I am your host for this episode. I was joined by three special guests who have a combined decades of experience and who are each experts in their respective fields. Charles Ivie, Senior Graph Architect at Amazon Web Services, Ben Clinch, partner at Ortecha, and Branimir Rakic, co-founder of OriginTrail and Chief Technology Officer at Trace Labs. So why don't we start with just some basic introductions. Ben and Charles, I believe this is your first time with us here on the podcast. So maybe starting with Ben and then going to Charles, you can just introduce yourself, what your organization does, what you do there. And then as well, I'm curious your general thoughts as we head into this on the state of AI today. It's a broad question. And what brings you to this conversation? We all met in person at the Decentralized Knowledge Graph conference. When was it? October of last year. What is sort of your mission and your purpose that brought you to that conference and that drives why you're here in this conversation today?
Fantastic. I'm Ben Clinch. I'm a partner at Ortecha. I've been there for 8 months. Ortecha is an organization that is dedicated to help companies thrive by getting maximum value and minimum risk from their data. I joined there from BT. I was the head of information architecture there. BT is a large telecommunications and digital services company in 180 countries. But prior to that, I had a pretty long career in financial services, helping organizations architect business processes, their departments, their policies, and then later their data and some aspects of AI like graph to better manage their organizations in an effective manner. I also lead the Artificial Intelligence Forum at the EDM Council, EDM standing for Enterprise Data Management, in which we bring experts from the member companies, 380 of the world's largest multinationals around the world, to collaborate and share information around artificial intelligence on a fortnightly basis. And I teach best practice in data management, both from a process but also a cloud perspective. And I'm very excited to answer the second part of your question around AI. We see, with increased use of large language models, a much greater public awareness of the opportunity from AI, of which we were fulfilling in terms of predictive and descriptive and symbolic AI for some time, but hadn't really become as well understood or well known until large language models and generative models became so popular. I think there's a lot of fear, in some cases rightly so, and in other cases it's misplaced. But I think it is a time where we should be using the momentum and the energy and focus on AI to try and shape the future that we want to live within and not be sort of pushed along on the tide.
What about you, Charles?
Yeah, thank you. Very pleased to be here today. My name is Charles Ivie. I'm a senior architect in the Amazon Neptune graph database team. I've been working with graph technologies and symbolic AI for about 14 years. Now, I was the founder of 2 startups in the graph industry. I've overseen multiple implementations using knowledge graph and symbolic AI, NLP, machine learning technologies over the years. And 5 years ago, I joined Amazon, joined AWS to join with the Neptune graph database team. And since then, we've been working really towards many of the same goals as the others on this call, but from a slightly different angle. And if I may conflate my bio along with the question which you asked about what do we think of the current AI thing, well, we've kind of all been working towards this ever since any of us started working in computer science and technology. I mean, essentially, this has always been the goal of creating machines to give us the ability to do more with the resources that we have. And really, it's an extension of that. And like with any other tool which has been developed since the dawn of man, the power is in those who wield those tools. So I think it's up to us to make sure that we can do our best to use those tools to the best of our abilities and make the most of these fantastic opportunities. So we've seen a big acceleration in the capability of what we can do with some of these things that we've specifically been working with anyway for the last 10 years or so in my own case, such as NLP, machine learning, and knowledge graphs. And now they're kind of coming together as a bit of a maelstrom, if you like, a combination of these things, which brings us all here today.
And Brana, I want to give you a chance as well. Most people on the call will probably know who you are, but feel free to introduce yourself anyways, and any thoughts that you may have on kind of what's driving you in the AI space today.
Thanks, Jonathan, and welcome again, everybody. I hope there's people on this podcast who don't know about me, because hopefully we're reaching more and more people with every episode. And therefore I'll introduce myself properly. I'm Branimir. I'm one of the founders behind OriginTrail, which is an open source decentralized knowledge graph project. We've been building it for actually quite many years. The first product was conceptualized even in 2011 in very rudimentary stage, but over the years, from a centralized closed source graph-based solution turned into a decentralized open source, in many ways standards-based technology that is governed by the community of the OriginTrail ecosystem. So went from small centralized company to an entire ecosystem. And I've been along the journey. I'm also the CTO of the core developer company. And I really align very, very well with what Ben and Charles said, in the sense of how we've been building this technology for ages to do things for us. The challenge of AI today is, even though it's becoming powerful, its power needs to be somewhat in line. Let's say needs some form of human-centric guardrails, so we don't get a Skynet scenario, which is not that crazy to think of as it was maybe when Terminator came out. Just when you look at, for example, the content online, even though it's not robots killing people, it's very influential in the sense of where the world is going. And it's very tricky to understand what is really real, what's true, what can you trust. And having that said, the big part of the mission of OriginTrail is to introduce trust into the information, having the ability to understand, to sift through what is real and what is not real. And that is, from our perspective, an important, even infrastructural thing for really computers and AI to operate on these guardrails. And we're very excited about the innovation in AI. There's a lot of great stuff happening, and we're happy to have the opportunity to be at the forefront of it, because what we are essentially doing is, I love how Charles put it, is combining symbolic AI with neural AI today. And these two technologies, I believe not everybody's doing this. So a lot of people most of the focus is on neural AI. And that's where there's a lot of opportunity at this intersection, together with the intersection with Web3. So Web3 in general, in principles sense, but also in what it can do today sense, 2025 sense. And there's a lot it can do. So for those of you who might not know about OriginTrail, it has managed to combine these things together and deploy them in production in many different environments, both in enterprise as well as, let's say, more Web3-oriented environments. Those would be, for example, Swiss Railways. They've been using OriginTrail decentralized knowledge graph for 4 or 5 years now. I'm still a bit tricky in terms of switching to 2025 mode still in my head. But they've been using it to track all kinds of things in the world of railways. That means physical objects, trains, parts, but also events like, for example, when certain safety critical things occur, such as repairs or just movement. They're trying to use that to, in a way, use AI basically to predict where the next problem might happen, and that those problems happen all over the world today. So we're happy to be working with Swiss Railways, as they're probably, if not the most innovative, definitely one of the most innovative railway companies in the world. We've been working together with major US retailers such as Walmart, Target, Home Depot. All these big guys are actually competitors, yet they're sharing knowledge through the decentralized knowledge graph, which was a very big win, in my opinion. Not just that they're big companies, but they're big competitors who are working together. And then we have many other companies such as British Standard Institution and others that are essentially been using the technology for a long time. So they see the value of their data, and as well as their data having the trust that is necessary for what they're trying to do. So I'm super happy to have the opportunity also to speak with legends like the two of you, Ben and Charles, and apologies, three of you. Jonathan is another legend here, but from a bit of a different background, because I think we can have a really nice conversation on this podcast in terms of where the future can be, but also where we are today. Because I know that you guys have been doing some amazing things in both of your corners of the semantic web slash knowledge graph world, and I'd really love the audience to hear about it, because I know you've been scoring some major wins for the technology. But anyways, I ramble on. I'm happy to be here, and I'll take it back to you, Jonathan, to drive us in where you want to drive us.
Well, I appreciate being considered a legend in the making. Maybe we can call myself that. So before we get too deep into knowledge graphs and semantic web and data and all the juicy topics we're going to cover, I have to ask Ben, so when we met at DKGcon, you were like ecstatic. You were having the time of your life. I believe you told me you were having trouble sleeping because your mind was just blown so much by the experience. So can you share a little bit about what exactly it was that blew your mind about going to DKGcon and kind of seeing this community or the synergy or I don't know. You can tell me in your own words what it was.
Absolutely. Well, I was very much educated about distributed knowledge graph at the conference, so I was really grateful to have been invited. And one of the things that I see a lot across society at the moment is people feeling disempowered and overwhelmed by events. The sheer volume of change going on in society can feel quite disempowering, and to be immersed in a community that you've built and a building of individuals who are dedicated to improving and doing real things that are actually going to move the dial in terms of trust and truth and creating a trusted internet for AI. It empowers people. And the other aspect is, of course, you mentioned around lots of large companies that are now, starting to embrace this technology, but also I was blown away by the sheer number of smaller businesses and builders that you've recruited and that are part of this incredible movement to be able to contribute on a level playing field in small ways that add up to big ways, influence the future. And so the community aspect of making it a human-centric data revolution, I thought was just really extraordinary. And I think in some ways I'm processing the implications of something like this. And so you're building a platform that is truly inclusive. I guess one of the things that I'm really fascinated by that's related to this, I follow a lot of research, I do a lot of reading so that I can share it with others. And I was lucky enough to go to Gartner's CIO Symposium in Barcelona last year. And in the Maverick sessions, which if you're familiar, they sort of imagine what's likely to happen in the future. Horstman, Aaron and Roy all mentioned some pretty cool things that are highly relevant to this, which is what if by 2032, 60% of the businesses manage trust as a corporate asset and determine 25% of the enterprise value from trust. And also they mentioned something that pretty much could describe OriginTrail, which is what if by 2035, at least 10% of the online data flows through truth nets, as they call it. And what is OriginTrail and the DKG if not a truth net? And they go further to say these truth nets guarantee provenance. So I was absolutely blown away by this as a movement and the opportunity to be able to be part of that.
The truth net even kind of sounds like paranet. There's just like a slight difference there. So it's almost like prophetic in what you were just reading.
It's interesting to think. I think one of the things which we often struggled with in the semantic web industry and in the graph industry in general for years actually was quite often portraying what was the point? What's the benefit of this over, say, other technologies and other things? And possibly one of the pieces that was missing was this understanding of the value of data being linked together. But why, when is data being linked together valuable? I'd say there's kind of two places where that's obvious. One is when it's within your own organization, so you already understand the provenance, so you trust it. And two is if it's distributed in some other network, which maybe isn't constrained to your silo, where it's still connected, but you still trust it. Until you trust it, it's very difficult maybe to gain value. So some of the stuff which we saw at DKGcon last year was so poignant to us and the work we've been doing in the semantic web community for so many years, because it was such a good example to really expose the true benefit of linked traversable data across networks, across companies, across different sources.
I want to stick with you, Charles. If that's okay with you. From what I understand, you are quite the, just to steal Brana's word, legend, I guess, in the knowledge graph world. You were saying when we were talking just the other day that, like, I think it's been 15 years that you've been working with knowledge graphs, and there are only a handful of people who have been doing it any longer than you. So can you explain to us what the significance of knowledge graphs are? Like, why are you still working on this 15 years later? Why are they so important and so powerful?
Yes, certainly. How long do I have? No, I'll. But the first thing I'd like to mention about that is that I'm only here because, as the old phrase goes, I'm standing on the shoulders of giants. It was people who I very much now have the privilege to work with who really brought these technologies to fore. Oral, Ascilla, people like that who I work with on a daily basis, I always like to cite. I've almost forgotten the question you asked now, but
just about why knowledge graphs.
I suppose what you're really asking is why, what was so important to me. I think when I first got into computer science and technology, I came from working in many other different industries. I wasn't a computer scientist at first in my professional life. So when I was educated in computer science, I was shown a path forward, and that path forward was somewhat restricted in my eyes from the word go. I didn't really realize it was at the time. Now, why was that? I think what I realize now is because it wasn't really truly data driven. Everything was always constrained to a set of rules which didn't seem logical to me, such as, this is how we store data. We're going to store data in these things called tables, and these things called tables can only be referenceable to other tables. And those other tables are defined in a certain way, and they have these things called keys, and they refer to keys. And that, to me, didn't really seem like the way we as human beings represent data as the way it exists in the real world. And I didn't really realize this at the time, but I came to realize it. And I came to realize it when I first saw the way that data was represented and understood in a graph form, in the semantic web form, which is actually recording data as you say it, in statements of fact, where you have effectively nodes and edges. Charlie knows Ben. It is in effect two nodes with an edge between them called knows. So when I saw this, it sort of opened my eyes to the possibility that data should be the first and most important first-class citizen of any software system. And that's really not what we've been doing for many years. That wasn't what was so prevalent. That really had me hooked. So from that point on, I didn't really want to work with anything that didn't have a data-driven philosophy behind it, because it seemed to be too constrained. And I think that feeds very well into language models in the end, because they too are based on recording statements of fact about reality, training.
You see, I love that. Actually, I've known Charlie for a little while now, but what I didn't realize was that the people who got me into knowledge graph all those years ago were originally influenced by Charlie. So it was fascinating to learn that. And so in terms of sort of the work that Charlie's done in terms of educating and spreading the word about this incredible opportunity, and just to sort of embellish or build upon what Charles said, when I first became aware of knowledge graph, indirectly because of Charles, through people who'd come into contact with him, I realized, that portraying reality, which is really what all data does. Data is our means of describing experience in an empirical manner. I continually refine my understanding with the help of brilliant people like Jim Holcomb from the EDM Council and others who I work with. And it was inadequate in terms of describing it in those tables, but also what we were seeing was within software systems, which I was developing. I was designing these way before I was into knowledge graph. We were describing reality in a very limited manner, in a very arbitrary and specific manner per software system. And then the discipline of integration, which is integrating systems so that they will talk and share information and functionality, was an incredibly complex and unnecessarily so, in fact, because it was having to marry the encoded experience of the database designer trying to describe reality in an arbitrary manner in different systems that were either contradictory or at best different and had to be somehow merged using integration. There's a wonderful book by Dave McComb called Software Wasteland that really aims to quantify the impact of that decision to use relational databases in that way. I'm not against relational databases, still use them in certain constructs. But actually, the wonderful thing about knowledge graph is the ability to actually describe reality in a more consistent and interoperable way from the get-go, which means that you're taking more of a data-centric view rather than a software-centric view. And the need for all this unnecessary, overcomplicated integration becomes less important. And that's critical in terms of AI. Because if you're going to give large language models context, it needs to be able to look across large numbers of data sets, which is, of course, the entire principle behind the decentralized knowledge graph. And then you couple that with the power of blockchain and the community, and you have something that's truly extraordinary.
Brana, maybe you have a little bit to add as well about your thoughts on the power of knowledge graphs, and then in particular, why decentralizing them is so important.
Yeah, I've been taking notes as the guys have been speaking. Some really awesome thoughts shared just there, which I echo absolutely. But yeah, I mean, I can say where we learned how knowledge graphs are powerful, because literally we had that journey from moving from relational databases onward, and I'll simplify it to an extent, but we found exactly the ability to expand from a certain smaller problem to, let's say, solving a bigger problem, being constrained. So we were specifically trying to basically solve tracking goods in supply chains. And we did start 15 years ago with relational databases. And as a startup, I was the only developer at the time. I was pretty well versed with relational databases, but had no clue at the time of knowledge graphs. So naturally, I built it in a relational database. And very quickly after, I had to do a couple of reiterations or updates. Anytime the system needed to be expanded, you kind of have to rework the whole data structure, or maybe not the whole, but a big part of it. At some point, I ended up literally emulating graphs in a relational database. I literally had a table of nodes and a table of connections. Nodes as in like these elements in the graph, these entities, because I needed something generic, and I started connecting them. And then I made a mess, because if you do that at scale, you're essentially creating so many of these connections between these two tables, or in relational sense, those are joins, that it breaks down completely. So I was desperate actually for a solution. And then I was in a way lucky to discover the solution in graph databases that were coming up just then, which solved this problem brilliantly, because they're designed exactly for that, to expand what you previously modeled as a solution for a problem that relies on data very easily with new things, new types of things, and making relationships with them, and doing that at scale so that it can very quickly, manage that in terms of any type of query you really need. And you're not constrained by this box nature of having tables around. So to us, that was like, we learned kind of the hard way, and then we saw the world open up, because once you see that, and once you start diving more into the original vision of semantic web that was presented and then evolved into knowledge graphs, it was just a kind of an aha moment. It was very obvious that this is the way to go. I love how Charles put it at DKGcon, as basically the graphs are the best way to model the real world, and 100% agreed on that. So that was our journey, starting with that. But then the next step of the journey was, who actually owns that graph. Because if at some point, somehow magically you get everybody to agree, for example, to track their supply chain goods or to track some social media content or whatever in one place, it's very hard to decide which one place that is if there's multiple parties, and generally in the world we are multiple agents interacting together. So it always becomes a question of governance and trust in that sense. So we very quickly realized that if you're going to do this with bigger businesses and ever bigger supply chains, you cannot stay a simple centralized system. It has to be more flexible, and ultimately everybody will want to own their own data. So in that sense, you have to enable some sort of, some people would say, middleware or network that would allow them to actually connect things that they already own, ideally not replacing the systems that they're building. So sort of building an overlay that manages knowledge across not one system, but multiple systems for reaching an optimum on the level of a supply chain or a network of some sort. And now if we go a bit more on the side of the way I think Ben mentioned it previously, is this is really becoming a societal thing, because not only are we becoming more dependent on technology, we're becoming more dependent really on the data that technology runs. It is the key fuel, if not the heart of everything. And when you think about that, then ultimately you realize that internet is one of the global things, that the problems are all global. There's no local problems. It's not a New York only problem or Serbian only problem, or everything is going on in a big network. And therefore, naturally, a solution has to any such global problem, have to have a global scale and a global approach. And that is definitely not a centralized approach. That doesn't mean that centralized technologies don't have their place. They're actually, in many ways, a must. You have to use them. So this split between centralized and decentralized, I don't mean it in the sense of good or bad. It's just they have different use cases. But if you want to solve a big global problem, you have to employ multiple different technologies together. And actually, that, if I may steal a bit of your role of a moderator, I wanted to actually ask specifically Charles about Neptune, because Neptune is one of the leading, if not the leading, graph database currently on the planet, if we're talking global. So I would really like to know if you can share a bit more about Neptune, some maybe successes about Neptune, and generally Amazon Neptune, as in what makes it a superpower number one graph database in the world.
Absolutely. Just a quick comment on something that you said there first, Branimir, which is something about centralized and decentralized systems. I suppose a decentralized system is in some ways a centralized system that's become public, which has been exposed, which, again, can only really be done if you trust the source and also if you trust the consumer. So it's just something that sprung to mind. But going back to Neptune, Amazon Neptune is a very easily accessible graph database, and it scales really easily. There are hundreds of people that create new Neptune graph instances every day, and there are graphs which are huge and there are graphs which are tiny. There's a graph which Amazon uses from Neptune, which has trillions of nodes spanning multiple clusters, federating queries, fulfilling for Amazon fulfillment. And then there are small application graphs which are serving very small purposes for singular applications. So really, it's a very easily accessible, scalable, serverless AWS service, if you'll allow me to coin some of the marketing. And if anybody's interested in exploring what we can do with Amazon Neptune, whether it's property graphs or semantic graphs workloads, then please do reach out to us. We're very keen to help with new ideas and new customers.
Awesome. Thanks. Any maybe names you could share of some, I don't know, big companies or whoever is using Neptune? I know that a lot of them are, but I don't know if that's something you'd like to share.
Well, we've spoken publicly about Wiz, who are an incredibly successful startup in Israel who are using Neptune. There's Netflix, Alexa, there's various public references. It's really very easy to find them.
I think you missed what might be the most important of them all, which is OriginTrail, correct?
That is absolutely correct. Yes, I do apologize, Branimir. Yeah. But you're quite right. I think one of the important things to know about Neptune specifically is this ability to be able to have graphs which are of any size and to create them so easily fits so well with something like OriginTrail. And the fact that we have federated query as a feature in there as well, meaning that you can connect different graphs across different locations, it just fits so well with the ethos. And we're really excited to expose these previously centralized and now decentralized data sources as part of the network.
So sticking on that topic for a minute, why exactly did OriginTrail decide to start building on Neptune as well?
Yeah, to be completely precise, Neptune support is about to roll out relatively soon. So if you want to use OriginTrail today with Neptune, you can, but you kind of have to do it a little bit on your own. Like out-of-the-box support is coming out with the newer version of the nodes, which is literally what we're working on as we speak, so in the coming releases. And why specifically? Well, because people are requesting it. So we have, especially on the enterprise side, bigger companies that we see that are requiring an AWS deployment, which naturally comes with Neptune. So it was a very easy signal that this should be prioritized, if you will, in terms of further adoption. So I cannot really share more at this time, but all I can say is that it's very exciting, and we're looking forward to seeing what else from that integration can stem as next steps in terms of what OriginTrail can leverage AWS technology for, which is obviously a vast array of very powerful stuff in the cloud. So expect more to see more in the near future. But at the moment, yes, Neptune is being pretty much fast-tracked for integration because of the demand. So yeah, that's coming up. It's going to be very interesting.
So I'm glad to say also I've used Amazon Neptune previously, and to great effect in organizations that I've been influential in. And where I find it incredibly beneficial is because it sits very well with other AWS analytic and cloud offerings. So obviously combining large language models with graph, or neurosymbolic AI as it's now called, is such a powerful way of grounding large language models. And by combining those two in the same environment is an extremely attractive opportunity beyond, and added to the great scalability and other aspects of being able to use a cloud native solution like that. I think that's very advantageous for many.
Sticking with you, Ben, what are some of the data products that Ortecha is building or that you might be involved in? And are there any that utilize the knowledge graph technology or AI or any of the topics that we've been covering here so far?
Fantastic. Well, our innovation lab does sit on the AWS stack. So that's something that we're really passionate about, and leveraging graph technologies for the benefit of our customers. Across the board, wherever possible, we think that the enterprises that we're helping are best represented as graphs, and a graph, if constructed in the correct way, can be considered a digital twin of the organization. So you can map everything from the value streams, business capabilities, the business processes, the systems and data that support those business processes, and indeed even the people and the total cost of ownership and productivity of an organization through a graph. And by building out those sort of digital twins, you can run simulations, including predicting how an organization will be impacted by changes in regulation, potentially things like business continuity and operational risk scenarios, in which I've heard of organizations thinking about rising sea levels and how that might impact their data centers, and what that would mean in terms of the systems and processes that are most mission critical. But right the way through to the ability to be able to turn off large portions of systems and replace them in a streamlined manner, which is a classic sort of enterprise architecture use case. Olesen Panyo, who's very influential around metadata and data cataloging, has created a thing called the metagrid, which is a fantastic concept associated with capturing the necessary metadata across an enterprise. Although he doesn't specify a particular technology to utilize, I would advocate that actually describing that information in a graph enables you to answer thousands and thousands of use cases. Always start with just a few use cases, or what I would call an excuse case, to get building, then build out those data products. Then you'll find that it can be used in many, many other ways as well. So yeah, I'm a massive advocate of utilizing graph for digital twins of enterprises. And that's where we spend a lot of time, because data management is about making those enterprises work more effectively. Data is the lifeblood of any organization. And if you can ensure that it's good quality and it's getting to where it needs to in the right time, those organizations work more effectively. So this is one of the key ways that we help by leveraging these technologies.
May I steal your role again, Jonathan?
Go for it.
It's a good segue into data products, because you did mention data products, and I know Ben and Charles are very much involved into a new standard for data products. So can you both gents tell us what DPROD is and how this idea come about? Just share a bit more, like, why are you working on this at all?
Charlie, would you like to go first?
Sure. I think I'd like to go a little bit high level. So DPROD, data products are essentially, it's a data product. Lots of people might understand what the concept of a data product is. It's a exposed piece of data as information which can be perceived to have value and therefore could be designated to be a product of some sort. And Ben and I and many others worked on a new DPROD data product ontology, which is an attempt to create a model, a schema, a graph schema, which we call an ontology, for everybody to use. And the reason that we did that is because if we can all speak about the same kind of model when we're describing a data product, we can create a model for a data product which is universal. If everybody's to use that, then these things can be linked together in a network to create catalogs and things like this. So DPROD is an attempt to standardize to a degree, to a certain extent, the key values and properties that make up a data product so that they can be linked together and distributed in graphs across different places, across decentralized knowledge graphs, if we can, these kind of things. So that's where it fits so neatly into everything else that we've spoken about today so far, about making the most out of data and linking it together, and provenance and lineage, origin.
Fantastic. And, we were really lucky to be part of an initiative that was really started by Tony Seal and Jacobus Gellick, who pulled together some extraordinary individuals who described the metadata necessary to ensure that data products are published with information that enables you to maximize their compatibility from the get-go. It's based largely on DCAT, which is a W3C standard that incorporates a number of other standards, including ODRL, the Open Digital Rights Language, which I'm a huge proponent of in terms of ensuring that you've described data and what you can do with it, what you can't do with it, and what you must do with it. It enables organizations to be able to understand really, or adopt a really good standard of describing data as a product distributed via services through input ports and output ports. So it's all beautifully documented in a way that's fairly easy to understand and enables the maximization of that data. Because of course, the data product itself, you want to encourage people to reuse it. Like any good product, you don't really want it for a single use. So if you're publishing and preparing this data as part of a data mesh, if you're familiar with Reshaping, originally from ThoughtWorks came up with the term data mesh, which largely describes reusable data products federated, usually within an organization, but there's no reason why it has to be limited to an organization, so that people can get maximum benefit from that data. So it's prepared once and used many times across the organization. So if you can describe that in a way that's easier for people to understand what it is and adopt it and combine it with other data products, then that's a great benefit. And of course, the distributed knowledge graph is in many ways the ultimate data mesh. It's describing across the world and a means of being able to connect those paranets of data in a way that will provide cumulative and exponential value rather than just sort of tiny silos of data as most organizations are still experiencing.
Yeah, if I may, it's my turn to hijack your role, Jonathan.
Go for it.
What we're describing and where we're going with this really is we're describing standardized ways of exposing data in a language that can be understood by many, including machines, for the internet, for the consumption of all. And we create standards so that they can be consumed by many. You know, there's a reason why cars all have a steering wheel, a gear stick, depending on which country you're in. We have these standards so that you can get into another car and drive it. And that's really what we're trying to do when we create ontologies. But also there's something else which is important, which is the other very, very powerful intelligence that we speak about, which is the artificial one. And the artificial intelligences we talk about now, the language models, are trained on the internet. So if we can standardize our language for data enough, and if there's enough training information, it's completely conceivable that you could ask even a foundational model like ChatGPT to list the data products that are available to me in a certain district for a certain purpose, for a certain reason, and what they're connected to. We should be able to come back with some really powerful answers. And that's one aspect, just one small aspect of how we see the future vision of truly linked data. The vision, I guess, of Sir Tim Berners-Lee and those who invented the semantic web in the first place.
I was waiting for somebody to mention him and the semantic web to chime in because, I mean, the concept is amazing and it's very old when you think about it. And I'm actually curious what you folks think of the vision. Like, some people say it never sort of materialized. I have my own opinion, but I don't want to steer the conversation in that direction. I'd like to hear what you think.
Well, I'll tell you what I think about that.
Yeah, go ahead.
As far as I can tell, it's the most catastrophically successful thing which people have called a failure that I can tell. Because this so-called failure of the semantic web to become so prominent is present in, I think it's at least 50% of web pages on the internet. This so-called failure is a remarkably successful one. In fact, it was so unsuccessful that large language models understand it really well. So much of what large language models traverse, and indeed much of what Google indexes, is indeed semantic web technology based. So I think it was a very good success so far.
Just to add to that, of course, some of the largest world-beating organizations are using semantic-like technology at the heart of what they do, including Google Web Search, including Amazon's online catalog, its shop, including Wikipedia, and keep going, Twitter, now X. These are all using that type of technology. But in terms of the semantic web itself, that metadata that is being used to describe the unstructured or semi-structured data that are web pages effectively incorporates metadata encoded as a thing called JSON-LD, which is classic semantic web technology. So in many ways, it almost describes really modern life would be impossible without some of these technologies. But it is, you're right to say that it's still, a lot of people don't think that it succeeded. And I'm always fascinated by that as a viewpoint. It's still a prevalent viewpoint. And yet it's one that's becoming less prevalent as people recognize the importance of grounding large language models with reasoning and logic and facts, which pure machine learning, which of course large language models are primarily based upon, is not great at alone. It needs to be augmented.
And that totally, I think, fits the DPROD vision because, I mean, obviously building on the shoulders of giants, as you mentioned, DPROD inherits all of the values of semantic web, but in a different world today, where it is about grounding LLMs, but even more, I believe the vision will be, let's say, fully achieved. And I agree, by the way, I have a very positive view on how successful semantic web is with the new first-class citizen of the internet, which very likely is very soon to be an AI agent or many different AI agents who will absolutely need to be grounded in some form of semantically organized truths, and therefore also have to have some form of way to discern the truths, whatever they consider the truth or not. So in our view, it absolutely has to be some implementation of a data product under the hood that these agents will consume. So that's why we really like the idea of DPROD at OriginTrail, because data products is literally just another way to say knowledge assets, which is the core technology under the hood in OriginTrail. And these knowledge assets basically incorporate much of the same principles. They're natively capable of employing DPROD. And that is also something that some people had a chance to see at DKGcon when we met. But I'm going to use this opportunity to mention that there will be also a very exciting thing together with DPROD and OriginTrail that the three of us will be showcasing in New York at the Knowledge Graph conference in May. So about 2 months from now, there's a lot of exciting stuff happening under the hood. Including that, you'll see things like Graph Build, for example, the tool that is one of the most important tools for builders who are trying to make sense of their data, in the graph sense especially, as well as other components that will tie in together. So there will be a very interesting session at the Knowledge Graph conference, and I'm very, very excited about it. But coming back to the data products and AI agents, I would like to also, again, hijack the moderator role and just hear what you folks think. Are agents going to be the first class citizen of the internet, and how will that work out? What's your opinion?
So I'm very excited about agents in general, and I think sometimes there's almost a view across the world that we're going for large AI that can answer everything. Well, we want AI to behave like human beings in many ways, but unlike human beings, we want it to be perfectly accurate all the time and always consistently accurate and correct, all powerful, and can do anything and everything within the organization. And of course, if you had an employee like that, that could be quite a risk, especially if it was compromised. That individual had been compromised in some way or had differing interests to you and the outcome of your organization. In fact, you probably wouldn't want to rely on a single point of failure in that way. We organize our teams with specialists, and that also helps us tune and train individuals or ourselves to be experts in particular areas. And actually, that network of individuals is actually probably more powerful than if we tried to hire somebody with godlike omnipotence and omniscience. So by combining those things as small specialist agents, it's less likely to be compromised. But also, comes back to the importance of provenance and security of data. We want to make sure that these agents and all that large AI that people seem to still be thinking about, we can ensure that they're informed by the best possible information, and it can't be compromised under their feet by rogue parties, rogue states, bad actors. That's going to be very important as well. So from an agent perspective, I'm very excited about that as a much healthier mode. It's also harder for powerful parties across the world to dominate the agentic AI space with just single models. And I think that helps with a sort of a democratic and healthy society.
If I may put a little bit of a metaphor around that, Ben, there are so many examples throughout history of why you need specialist tools for specialist purposes, right? You'd be pretty concerned if a builder turned up at your house and only had a Swiss Army knife.
Love it.
And, that's not what you want. And when you design a car, you don't design every part of the car at the same time. You design the carburetor, you design the gearbox to get the best out of it. It's separation of concern. It means you can take the part out, you can look at it in detail, you can make sure it works correctly, and you can put it back and you can replace it. So agents are the obvious way that functioning systems work correctly.
It's a great metaphor.
Ben, you're the only one who has not played the role of the moderator yet. If you have any questions you wanted to ask the rest of the guys here.
Well, I guess in terms of, I'm really impassioned about this, as you can tell, since I've met Bran and the incredible stuff that's going on at OriginTrail. I mean, if there was a call out to the community, a call to action that we could help promote, what would you say in terms of how people can get involved and help move this forward together with us?
Didn't expect that one, but yeah, wonderful question. There's many ways one can participate in the ecosystem, both as an open source developer, people can contribute code, but also even more I believe an even more exciting use case is building their own products using the technology, using it as sort of 80% of the stuff already pre-built as an infrastructure, and then building your paranets on top, or products that leverage the knowledge graph technology under the hood with their associated knowledge assets or data products. We can look at them that way and build agents based on them, build all kinds of AI systems. So that's another way to contribute. There's also other ways in terms of generally sharing the vision, getting it out there so that the world is actually moving towards this vision of open, collective, safe AI, which is to be built with all of these parts. So you can come and be just part of the community in the sense of joining the discussion, moving the ideas forward in Discord, in Telegram, on the socials, and really contributing with your own unique perspective on the vision. Because again, this is not a company or product, it's an ecosystem. Everybody has an opportunity to plug their ideas in, launch data products or launch systems and AI based on these fundamental technologies of semantic web, trust, and essentially the ability to even incentivize people to do the right thing, which is one big aspect of OriginTrail, is the ability to incentivize knowledge sharing, or really the proper actions, which comes in perfect synchrony with the rise of AI agents, because they also, all of AI basically operates on incentives, right? So even the machine learning algorithms, they use incentives at their core. So yeah, thanks for posting that question, Ben. And yeah, if you're building in the graph space, we'd love to meet you. So as we met at the conference, it was amazing, and we keep building together. We like more people to join us and to bring this vision forward. But yeah, I'm also conscious of time. I'll stop here. I guess maybe we'll do one last round, I guess, or Jonathan, you're not stealing your role anymore, so you take it away.
My role is up for grabs. It's a moving title. It's a concept. It's an idea. But no, I just wanted to, I guess, to sort of wrap things up. People are afraid of AI. There's this idea that AI is here to steal your jobs, that AI, like you were saying earlier, is going to go Skynet and take us all out. And I do think there is some reason to be concerned, for sure. I think everyone on this call, that's why you're you're here. But just as kind of a closing thought, and again, we can go around it's not a circle, it's a rectangle, I guess, looking at everyone's faces. We can go around in the rectangle and share your final thoughts on this topic of AI. Should we be afraid of AI? And sort of how the things that you're individually working on are helping to make AI more reliable, more safe, and more trustworthy.
Brilliant. Well, look, I think it's too easy to become overwhelmed by the complexity of the world right now. There are so many different moving parts, and AI is one of the fears that people have. AI is just a very powerful way of doing things, and that power can be used in a good way or a bad way. Bran and the team have created a movement, a platform, a community in which we can contribute and help shape the future we want to live in, and we want the world to actually help create. And so what I guess my parting thought would be, choose empowerment, choose getting involved in something that has similar values to yourself to be able to improve the world, because it is entirely possible that any of these technologies can be misused. And this is a framework and an approach which minimizes those risks and maximizes the benefits. And if we're to be smart as a society and a world, we need to be putting our efforts and our energies towards that, and not feel disempowered, then step away from the opportunity. Let's create the future we want to live in.
Well said, Ben. To mirror one thing you've said, the power of anything is in the hands of those who wield it. We are the beneficiaries of many a millennia's worth of engineering and intelligence to come together to create what seems to be on the verge of, for the first time, as far as we can tell, being an intelligence comparable to our own. But in some ways it's not. And sometimes actually what it is a almost centralized network, a mirror the first time really we can look at a mirror of the whole of the human race's opinion. Because the answers we get back from these models are not an answer from one person, they're actually an answer from us all. So in some ways that actually gives me a lot of hope. Because quite frankly, given that fact, I'm amazed it doesn't tell me to do one. Go away every time I try and speak to it. For the simple fact that we have quite often a very negative opinion of ourselves. So it fills me with hope and fear, as every human endeavor always has done. But we've got to plow on. It exists. Let's make the most of it.
I love that. It's a great way to put it. I'll add a little bit of perspective. I just heard recently somebody mentioning how previously technology, like for example, flight and airplanes, they've been, from start to today, the difference is huge in a big sense because like at the beginning, there were no sort of guardrails. There was no way to, protect this new way of, doing things or flying. And then today, when you look at it, flying is the most statistically safest way to move around the planet. It's because obviously along the way we learned how to make it so. So I'm optimistic in terms of how humanity will embrace AI, because we will be building these similar systems just as we did with airports and all the flight related things. We will, in my opinion, we are already building those systems into AI, and parts of those systems need to be symbolic AI, knowledge graphs, data products. I'm very optimistic. It's also one big thing about this is that it's not that far away that we as humans can do a lot of great things with this if we apply these technologies right. So that's why I'm super excited about doing this thing in New York together, because we will effectively be showing how you can build safe AI, an agent effectively based on the different technologies. So I'm super excited. And this is basically consider it an invite for everybody who wants to join us in New York in beginning of May at the Knowledge Graph conference. Ben, Charles, myself, and some more people will be there, and we'll be showcasing this hands-on in real time, so you can also come and learn together with us. So it's not that far away, and it's going to be very, I think very empowering, because you could come and you not know much, and then when you leave, you will actually be able to have your own agent that does something sensible and in a safe way. So I know it might sound like a bold claim, but I know because we've done it. So it's going to be very, very exciting. But yeah, looking forward to New York, especially meeting you guys there again.
Wonderful.
All of you, all four of you, all three of you.
Yeah, very much looking forward to it. Thank you very much for organizing this for us today, guys. Jonathan, Branimir, it's been really fun.
Yes, thank you. It's been wonderful speaking with you.
Likewise. Thanks for joining us, guys. Thanks for taking the time. It was a pleasure, as always.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you to all three. Fascinating conversation. Charles, you were saying, again, when we were prepping for the episode, that you want me to leave better informed than I came in.
Yeah.
So I certainly have left better informed. So I appreciate all three of you for that.
Wonderful. Thank you, John.
Welcome to the decentralized network of us.
Amazing.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Take care, everybody. Stay on track. This has been On Track, brought to you by OriginTrail. If you like what you heard, consider giving the show a follow and leaving a 5-star review. You can keep up to date with OriginTrail on Twitter/X at origin_trail, and you can follow me, your host, at MadDopeMadic. That's MadDopMadic. Until next time, stay on track and trace on.